How are we doing, guys? And welcome back to All Leeds TV. It's been a crazy last couple of days, really. Leeds United, let's just say, are 9 points clear from the relegation zone because I think since we last spoke, Chris, Norwich did us a massive favour on Sunday. So let's start with the massive positives. 𝐃𝐎𝐿𝐄 𝐾𝐄, you absolutely beautiful man, first and foremost.
I've always liked Norwich, never had a problem with them.
Yeah, Tim Krul, 𝐃𝐎𝐿𝐄 𝐾𝐄 have always been sound lads, always been sound, always knew they had our backs, didn't they? But mate, obviously, the title of the video suggests there has been a little bit of something that's kind of made its way into the Leeds media sphere pretty rapidly. Jesse Marsch this morning did an interview with Talksport discussing his start at Leeds United. And there's been one or two comments from that interview that's caused a stir. I think it's caused us a bit of a split. I think it's a 50-50, it feels like. I might be wrong on this, but it feels like a 50-50. I think half have got no problem with what Jesse Marsch has said. The other half have taken issue with it. I'm not having to go at anyone for having different opinions to myself, but we're just going to discuss our thoughts on what has been said. Now, let's first of all focus on what has been said. So this is the exact quote. Jesse Marsch was asked about Leeds United's injury record this season, and this is his kind of response to it. These players were overtrained, and it led to them being physically, mentally, emotionally, and psychologically in a different place, in a difficult place to recover from week to week, game to game. Now, some people have taken that as a criticism of Marcelo Bielsa. Maybe it is a criticism of Marcelo Bielsa, but 𝐃𝐎𝐿𝐄, I'm going to go to you first, mate. What's your general feeling on that quote? Do you think was it misguided of Jesse Marsch to say that, in your opinion? Do you feel uneasy at all about Jesse Marsch saying that?
Absolutely. I don't, mate. No, I think at the end of the day, facts are facts. And for the way Jesse Marsch works, and when he came into the club, he found the players to be exactly as he stated. He was brought into the club for a reason, because what we've been doing previously with Marcelo wasn't working anymore. And a big factor of this season has been the amount of injuries and players genuinely looking tired for most of the season, let's be honest, mentally exhausted, a lot of them. And I think there's been a couple of players that have sort of corrected themselves in interviews. I know Jack Harrison did it post-match. He sort of said something like, it's nice to be doing this again. He went, not that we weren't enjoying it before, but, so the players were obviously tired of the methods that were being used. And the manager's stating facts, and it just feels like to me that a certain portion of the fan base are just looking for any stick to beat the man with, and it's just a little bit unnecessary. He's only saying what he sees, and I quite like a manager who says what he sees. Marcelo was always quite honest, although he was always through an interpreter, of course, but I always found Marcelo to be quite honest. Once you deciphered the riddles, because he was that perfectionist who liked to, I don't know, it took a bit of deciphering, bless him, but he was always an honest man, right down to his core. And I'm quite glad Jesse Marsch is the same, personally. I wouldn't want him to just go, if he'd have just shrugged his shoulders and gone, I don't want to talk about that, it was before I arrived, then people would be like, well, what's he avoiding questions for? So I just think it's all a bit of a nonsense, mate. The man's saying what he sees, and I quite like that. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm on mute. Apologies for that, guys. That was absolutely brilliant what I was about to say there, guys. Absolutely. It's the best 10, 20 seconds of speech I've ever said on All Leeds TV, that, and you've just missed it. How gutted are you all? But look, I don't think this should be made bigger than what it is. I think the reason we've done the video is that, to an extent. Some people might say we're defending Jesse Marsch. Yeah, maybe we are defending Jesse Marsch a little bit. But I think we need to go back to the fact Jesse Marsch was asked a question about injuries. He was asked a question about injuries. And as Chris has just said there, what else can he kind of say? If he avoids the question, he gets criticism in a different way. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation, I think, for Jesse Marsch. I think a big thing is, when we look at football now, we criticise footballers for putting out generic tweets, generic answers in interviews, generic everything, and it's all like we criticise footballers for being robots, and managers the same to an extent. We laud. I think you see people like Pep Guardiola, Klopp, and that lot. different managers, Mourinho back in the day, all these different managers lauded for being honest in interviews and that lot, and giving insights and that lot. And all I feel Jesse Marsch has done is given an insight. I don't feel, because the thing is, I think if you ask any new manager a question about what they've done since they've come in, there's got to be some level of criticism for the previous regime, because otherwise, if everyone was rosy with the previous regime, they wouldn't be the new manager, if that makes sense. So there's got to be some kind of criticism there in the first place. And I think I don't see a problem with it personally. Let us know in the comments, guys. Let's get some comments in on this, because I think the rest of all these TV really. I know it's split opinion. We're not telling people what they should think and shouldn't think, but I just don't see the big fuss here. I think there's a lot of context that needs to be considered. Because if you just look at that quote out of context, maybe it does look a little bit bad, but he was asked a question about injuries. And there's another big quote in this whole debate that people have totally ignored, was the fact that right at the start of the interview, I'll just get the exact quote here, so don't misquote anything, so he's asked a question about obviously what he's done so far at Leeds, why he's popular at Leeds, and he even said, the exact quote from Jesse Marsch was, "There's even dialogue right now about comparing Marcelo and myself, which I find ridiculous." So you can't criticise Jesse Marsch for coming across as arrogant in his answer to the other question when he's just said right at the start of the interview he finds it ridiculous as a comparison between him and Marcelo Bielsa. I think no one's comparing Jesse Marsch and Marcelo Bielsa, and if Jesse Marsch achieves even half of what Marcelo Bielsa achieved at this football club, then he'll have done an absolutely superb job. That's the absolute first and foremost thing to say. But one point I want to throw to you, Chris, is that this thing about respect and all this lot, let's not forget that last season, Pablo Hernandez, who had done unbelievable things at this football club, was suddenly taken out the team. Now, if we're talking about things like respect and that lot, things happen in football. I don't think Marcelo Bielsa was being disrespectful to Pablo Hernandez in the same way I don't think Jesse Marsch is being disrespectful to Marcelo Bielsa. I just think things happen in football. It's not a nicey kind of game. It is dog eat dog in football. Certainly in the Premier League, it's the toughest league in the world. And yeah, Jesse Marsch's concerns are his players, not Marcelo Bielsa. His players in the football club.
Yeah, 100%, mate. You're absolutely
right. Yeah, and that's my view on it, to be totally honest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, mate. To be at an elite level of any profession or vocation, whatever it may be, to be at an elite level, there has to be an element of selfishness, undoubted drive, undoubted belief in your own ability, and also an element of, I'm going to do it my way. You can't, to be at an elite level, you have to have that selfish mindset to a certain extent. And I don't mean that, and Jesse's selfish mindset is around what he's got in front of him right now, and that is Leeds United Football Club and that squad of players. And he's protecting those players. Do people really believe that the players haven't spoke to Jesse since he came in and potentially have said, that training we used to do was hard work, I was absolutely frazzled? We know he's had conversations with the players. This isn't him just spouting this comment off the hip and just to get a few clicks. He's
very collaborative, isn't he? Jesse Marsch. That's the impression I've got from the first minute of coming in. He's had a leadership group. He's already spoken about. He's made Rodrigo a big part of that leadership group due to his experience, and we know he's collaborative, Chris. So it's definitely a case for that.
Yeah, of course, mate. And he's not fresh to this game. He's been around and he's coached throughout Europe and in the States, and he knows what he wants as a manager and what he expects. And what he came into our club and found was a group of players that were probably more mentally than physically exhausted. Obviously, a lot of injuries, so that's the physical side, but just mentally exhausted. Jack Harrison was absolutely mentally fragged for me. Rodrigo, definitely mentally ruined. And that's not me blaming Bielsa. I'm just saying that Bielsa's way didn't work for all, being very sort of secluded from the players, etc., etc. That's just Bielsa's way, and it won't work for everyone. Not everyone will flourish under that kind of regime, and there'll probably be players that won't work well under Jesse, and it'll be for Jesse to weed those out and, sell them, move them on, whatever, and bring in his type of players. It's the nature of football. It happens. It's the nature of any job out there. I can work really well for one boss because I get on with them. I've got the same beliefs as them. when it comes to how we commit to work and deliver work. And then the next one, I might be like, I can't work with you. Nothing personal, nothing disrespectful. We've just got different views on how to do things, and it doesn't work. It is what it is. And people, again, and when I say people, I mean Twitter, just look for any stick they can to beat Jesse Marsch with. And for me, if you're a supporter of the football club, you can have opinions. Yes, we can all have opinions, but it starts to become a bit ludicrous when you can see right through them, and you just like, he could have said anything and you'd have found a fault with it. He could have come in and said, Marcelo Bielsa walks on water and he's definitely the second coming of Christ. And someone has said, that's disrespectful. He's God himself. Do you know what I mean? So it's just a bit of a nonsense, mate. The man was asked a question. He gave an honest answer. And we'll get into the fitness side in a minute, and I'll obviously speak on that. But yeah, I don't understand it, mate. I don't understand this big outcry over social media about Jesse's comments. I really don't.
That's the point I was going to make about Pablo, and even Rafinha you can go to an extent. Marcelo Bielsa last season, Pablo Hernandez has been a massive part of this football club. Marcelo Bielsa decided he wasn't right for the Premier League, and look, I don't think Marcelo Bielsa was disrespectful for that. I'm just making the point with that things happen in football. Things happen, and if everyone had the same opinion about everything and that lot, then everyone's disrespectful. Then that's the kind of point I'm making. This whole thing stems from Jesse Marsch being asked about injuries. What else is Jesse Marsch supposed to say? He's supposed to say it was absolutely fine. There's no problem. We didn't have any injury problems at all. The previous training was absolutely fine in terms of we weren't picking up injuries left, right, and centre. I had no problem with Marcelo Bielsa's methods. I still felt that there was potential there. I didn't think Marcelo Bielsa should have been sacked by Leeds United. But what I will say is Jesse Marsch has done an unbelievable job. Let's remember this. He's done an unbelievable job. And the players were getting absolutely battered left, right and centre around the time Jesse Marsch came in. I'm not saying this is rightly or wrongly. I'm just saying facts. The players were getting a lot of the blame for the situation Leeds were in and not Marcelo Bielsa. Jesse Marsch saw that. Jesse Marsch is defending the players in his team. That's all he's doing there for me. You've got to look at the here and now. The here and now is the players at this football club. No single person is bigger than this football club. I adore Marcelo Bielsa. I absolutely adore the man. And Jesse Marsch will have to go some to be Marcelo Bielsa. But that's the point I'm making. And if you look at it in a different way as well, and people will not be happy with this video, fair enough, but there's one thing you've got to look at here. Marcelo Bielsa's legacy at Leeds United, as long as we stay up, and it looks like we are going to stay up now, we've got a big chance of staying up. It's not done yet, it's not done, but we've got a big chance of staying up if we look at the here and now. Marcelo Bielsa's legacy is safe at Leeds United in terms of being one of the greatest managers this football club has ever had. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was ever seriously at risk, but had the club gone down, it had been looked back on in a very different way.
Yep.
To an extent, I'm not saying this is completely fact, and I know Jesse Marsch has had some favourable situations. We've had an easier run of games, we've had players come back from injury, etc., etc. Jesse Marsch has protected Marcelo Bielsa's legacy by keeping hopefully keeping the club in the Premier League. That's the way I look at it. I'm not saying we should all be having street parties for Jesse Marsch and all this lot and naming streets after him for this. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's not like he's just come into the job last week and started having a go at Marcelo Bielsa. He's genuinely been here for 6 games now, seen what it's all about, and put his new ideas across. If you ask Jesse Marsch about man-to-man marking versus his zonal marking, he'll have to give a similar answer. Because you get any new manager in, there's going to have to be, you ask him a question like that about what they're doing differently, there's going to have to be some level of criticism against the previous manager. Because he wouldn't be in the job.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the thing.
Yeah.
Well, what's the point otherwise? Because if Jesse Marsch said, "Oh no, my ideas are rubbish. I don't know why they hired me," then he's not going to say that. I don't know what other way he could answer the question. And I think it's perfectly fine to adore Marcelo Bielsa and love Jesse Marsch or whatever, or like Jesse Marsch. Maybe love's a bit far. It's perfectly fine. I don't see it at all betraying Bielsa in that kind of sense at all. At the end of the day, Marcelo Bielsa, knowing the way Marcelo Bielsa is, he'd be very, very happy seeing what this football club's doing. He'd be very happy that it looks like we're going to be okay. It looks like we're kicking on. It looks like we're evolving. There's still a lot of the things about this football club has still got Marcelo Bielsa's, footprint on them in terms of the youth development. In terms of you're seeing Joffrey Gelhardt come off the bench, Sam Greenwood, Charlie Cresswell, all players that Marcelo Bielsa gave opportunities. Jesse Marsch has continued that. So I just think it's a very dangerous angle to go down, that Jesse Marsch is disrespecting Marcelo Bielsa, and it's a Clough versus Remy kind of scenario, because that's what it's kind of been built out to be. Jesse Marsch from the off, getting this job, has done nothing but praise Marcelo Bielsa. In every single opportunity, he said Marcelo Bielsa is a legend. I think he said a minute into his first. How many new managers who get a job do you see say about the previous manager and describe him as a legend? It's a very risky thing to do. It is a risky thing to do, because then you're thinking, hang on a minute, that's an odd thing to say. But Jesse Marsch, I think, has played it off really well, and I think he deserves credit for that. I mean, I can think of a lot of managers who Leeds United could have gone for when they decided to sack Marcelo Bielsa that would have done a lot worse than what Jesse Marsch has done in an interview. Look, unrealistic, I know, but do you think Jose Mourinho would have said something like that about the previous manager? I know we're not going to get Jose Mourinho, but you kind of see what I'm saying. You can't say he's that level of disrespect to a previous manager. That's the point I kind of want to make. But Chris, speak to me about the sports science element of it, because you are very, very, very clued up on the subject, and just tell people your background before you go into this, because you are super clued up on this. So I'm just going to let you talk on this one.
Okay, so I am a fitness coach. It's one of my professions. And I try and educate people, not just give them training plans and nutrition plans, but educate people on how to look after their body, how to get the best out of it, how to not overdo it and ruin the body, which is a very big thing. And I think it's very overlooked in large parts of the fitness community, that rest and recovery is actually as important as doing the work itself. Certainly when you get into your more senior years, like me, and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, I have got some knowledge around what we're talking about now and what Jesse's mentioned. And with fitness, so we're talking about elite level athletes here now, professional footballers. They're elite level fitness wise for what their bodies need to do, and that's run around a football pitch for 90 plus minutes. And in Leeds United's case, over the last 3.5 years, it's be the fitter team, run more, run harder, and all the rest of it. There comes a point where unless you give that body a chance to rest, your body will break down. And this season, we've seen it every season. We've had a decent amount of injuries every season under Bielsa, but this season it really caught up with us. And I think there was two reasons, or two elements this season. There was the amount of injuries, but also the players that were getting injured. So we lost the complete spine of the team, with Cooper, Phillips and Bamford all being out. But when it comes to the rest and recovery side, so for example, I train every day of the week in some form. And what I mean by train is I do something every day. So I will lift weights 4 times a week. I will do cardio 3 to 4 times a week at the minute, but that's because I'm in a cutting phase, a diet phase. And then the rest of it is just activity and not really fitness. So I hit 10,000 steps a day, and I might not do anything else on that day, weights or cardio, and I'll just do steps. So just, going out, walking the dog or walk around the shops, whatever it may be, just get steps in. And that's active recovery. And that's where your body gets time to rest and recuperate. And then I also do things for my clients, like, as you know, also they have what we call deload weeks in weightlifting, bodybuilding. And basically what that is you'll train for so long, so many weeks. For me, I do 5-week blocks. And then we do a deload where everyone will work at 30 to 40% less effort or less load, whatever it may be, being put through the body for a week. And again, that's active recovery. So we're not training quite as hard, and we're letting the body sort of breathes, your muscle fibers repair. Because if I do a 5-6 week block of weight training, by the end, my body's tiring because I'm working the same muscle groups 2-3 times a week for 6 weeks and doing progression. So I'm getting fitter every week because I'm pushing more and more, and the body starts to break down. Injuries start to set in, aches and pains start to set in. So a deload, come off, have a week active recovery, not off it, active recovery, and the body rejuvenates. And it just feels to me that at Leeds United, we not got away with it because Marcelo's methods worked. We got promoted. We were the fittest team in the Championship. We were the fittest team last season in the Premier League. But again, I don't think, and we've had condensed pre-seasons because of COVID and all the rest of it, and we've got a small squad. So you're putting a lot of load consistently through very few people and expecting the same results or better fitness-wise week in, week out, and the body starts to break down. And it's the amount of hamstring injuries we've seen. Cooper, blown hamstring. Phillips, blown hamstring. I think Bamford did his hamstring at one point. And they're large muscles that are being grafted and grafted and grafted. And eventually they just go, I can't do this anymore. I can't work under this load for this long. And they break down. So again, people are going to go, you're throwing shade at Bielsa. I'm not. He was brought in to Leeds United, did an unbelievable job, made the players the fittest they've ever been, taught them about, I think, nutrition and everything was brought into play with them, and they are fitter and better human beings for it. But fitness-wise, again, the rest didn't seem to ever come. Certainly not the right amount. And I'm not privy to any conversations that have happened inside the club, between doctors, physios, and the previous manager and his management team. But I get the feeling it was Marcelo's way or no way at all, which some will say is the right way. He's the manager. Some will say it's the wrong way. You should take advice on board. I've got no opinion.
What I'd say is, I think Marcelo Bielsa had a loss of credit in the bank because he's Marcelo Bielsa for starters. And I don't have a problem with that in terms of he had complete control because it served us brilliantly for 3 years. I think it's important to say as well is that we're not linking it to like Bielsa burnout. We're just linking it to the injuries, aren't we? That's something just in case anyone wants to jump on this video, we're just making it clear that we're just talking about the injuries because no one can deny our injury records over the 3.5 years was absolutely crazy. And maybe it wasn't entirely down to Marcelo Bielsa, but not entirely down to Marcelo Bielsa's training methods. Should importantly say that. That's the thing to say, but yeah, it's just in terms of what Jesse Marsch said. This is it. We don't need to make a big thing about this. We've only done this video just basically to defend Jesse Marsch because we know that a lot of people watch us. We know that. We know there's a lot of kind of narratives about Jesse Marsch at this moment in time. And we just feel that it's fair to defend the guy. We only feel it's right. We only feel that's the right thing to do. And we spoke about doing this video, and I think that's what we've kind of done here, Chris.
Yeah, it's right, mate. Do you know what I mean? Again, the man's only saying what he's seen and heard since he come in the club. I mean, no doubt that players and potentially Rob Price from a medical point of view. Again, this is me speculating, but Jesse Marsch will have had conversations with a lot of people around what their physical state is, what their mental state is, all the rest of it. And then he comes up with his own conclusions. And does everything fit with the way Jesse Marsch does football? No. But he's also, and he said previously, he also does a lot of the same things as Marcelo Bielsa. And as you said, mate, he's got the utmost respect for him, called him a legend, says he wants to build on what Bielsa's already built at Leeds. He's not a manager like you potentially would get, who comes in and goes, tear this up and start again, my way or no way at all. He's come in and he was identified.
That was my worst fear, that, Chris. It says I never thought Bielsa would go when he did go. I never thought it'd be like in the middle of the season. But my worst fear was someone coming in who would come in and say, right, we're doing this, 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 and this, and this. I don't want to have any questions about Marcelo Bielsa. I'm not going to talk about Marcelo Bielsa. It's my way or the highway. That was my worst fear about this. In terms of no disrespect to him, a Steve Evans-like coach coming in, not obviously higher quality than Steve Evans, but I'm talking that kind of personality. That was my worst kind of fear in terms of when we got rid of Marcelo Bielsa. That was, but it's not turned out to be the case. I think, to be honest with you, I think Jesse Marsch is being near enough perfect, to be honest with you, in terms of since he's come in terms of the job he's had to do. Yeah, I don't see any.
And I think this is where credit needs to go to the board, who have been ridiculed over this by certainly with the way the Bielsa sacking was handled as well, which I think is fair ridicule. I don't think it was done properly. But they identified Jesse, 2 years ago as the man to take over from Bielsa when the time came. They've obviously done the homework on him, his ethos, his methodology when it comes to football, and identified a manager who they think they can bring in who will build on Marcelo's work and not come in and tear the form book up. So a little bit of credit has to go their way as well. This wasn't a rash decision. It was a bit rash the way it was done, in my personal opinion. But the man has long been identified as Marcelo's replacement, and there's reasons for that. This isn't a flash in the pan panic, get Big Sam in to save us from relegation. This has been well planned, and Jesse was always coming in at the end of this season, and it's just been brought forward basically to try and get that new manager bounce and get enough points to get away from the relegation zone. He came in, we were 2 points above it, we're now 9 points above it. So he's very close to being first job done. So I think, again, people going at him for being honest in an interview and spewing what looks like facts to me is just a bit ridiculous, mate.
I just think there's been a few narratives this season. I think the Rafinha one was one that really wound me up a little bit because, in terms of obviously Rafinha's character was getting questioned. And look, I'm not saying what people should think and shouldn't think, but I just thought some of it got a bit unnecessary at times. And I think, it was harsh on him. I think he was clearly frustrated. And look, I'm not going to defend professional footballers. Professional footballers have a very lovely job. They have the job anyone would dream of. And yeah, you obviously saw Rafinha getting a lot of stick, and you kind of saw after that Norwich game how much it kind of had got to him, or it looked like it had got to him after that Norwich game. It seemed like it took a lot out of him, and that was a massive sigh of relief, obviously having a big part in winning that game for us. But when Bielsa took off Rafinha at half-time at Everton and said it was a tactical decision, that's not disrespectful to Rafinha for me. But if you're saying what Jesse Marsch said about Bielsa was disrespectful, then that is also disrespectful for me. That's the kind of argument I'm trying to make. And it's also disrespectful the way that Pablo was dropped out of the team last season. I don't think any of it's disrespectful, but you've got to be consistent for me with your views. That's just always been my view. No matter how high esteem we all hold Marcelo Bielsa in, we can't have one rule for one person and another rule for another person. That's the only point I'm making here. I just think football, it's not this nice sport. It is very much a cutthroat kind of environment. It just is. It's just the nature of what football is. It is a brutal environment sometimes, and that's, unfortunately, we've found it. I mean, the last 3 years have been absolutely unbelievable, and I think this season was just more of a shock because in the past we've been used to this. We've been used to it not quite going fully to plan and us having to make managerial changes halfway through the season. We just had got so used to everything being good, and then we forgot almost what football is like on the outside. And I know Marcelo Bielsa, the journey he took us on, he took us away from modern football in a way. He kept us as Leeds United. And I'm hoping Jesse Marsch will do the same thing. But this is modern football, unfortunately. This is what happens. You get managers get interviewed. The media are after clicks. That's what the media's been after. It's literally 5 seconds of a video. And I don't know about you, 𝐶𝐾, but I think we should probably wrap it up here. I think we have probably given our views pretty clearly on the matter. But I'm just saying, I just think you've got to look at things in a consistent way.
Yeah.
No, and that's the only point I'm making. I don't think anyone's done any wrong in this whole matter. That's just my personal view on it. And you've got to remember, the players were getting absolutely hammered. And you know what? The way we were playing at the time, we'd lost 6-0 at Liverpool, 4-0 at Tottenham. I'm not having a go at anyone for criticising the players, but I'm just saying Jesse Marsch are seeing this from the inside. We're only seeing this from the outside. We don't know how much this has affected the players. In terms of they've lost they've lost Marcelo Bielsa. They're getting absolutely criticised for it. You let Bielsa down. This and this. Jesse Marsch has seen the opportunity to give praise to his players more than anything, and I think Jesse Marsch would probably be surprised by the response in terms of his interview. I think he'd be a bit gutted. I don't know. I think Jesse Marsch would be a bit gutted that it came across that way. I don't know. I don't know if you agree with that, CK.
The problem comes now, mate, is in the next pre-match interview or presser that he does. This is what he's going to get asked about, and he's going to have to defend his comments and justify them. And it's the nature of the British media, and it always has been the nature of the British media. And now with social media on top, where, like you said, they're just after clicks because it generates revenue. They're just cherry picking a little comment that a manager's made about what he's found when he's walked into a football team. And Talksport are actually very clever because Talksport know exactly the kind of fan base that jumps on something like this and gets all overexcited and throws comments in and shares and all the rest of it. And that is a Leeds United fan base. Soon as we feel,
this has gone to plan for Talksport. This is what we all need to remember. This has gone to plan for Talksport, and this is something very important to point out. It's not the first time something like this has happened with Talksport. Gabby Bombahor last season. Who else was happening? Jamie O'Hara, other people like that. And it gets what they want. You know what I mean? Talksport say a lot of things. I think a lot of things that get said on Talksport, and look, I think we know a lot of things that get in Talksport. I don't think half the pundits believe what they're actually saying. It's just literally what's going to get the biggest response.
Yeah.
Fernandinho has retired from Man City today. It wouldn't surprise me if in the next couple of days, one pundit will say he's the best holding midfielder the Prem's ever seen because he knows it'll get clicks and people will go, Roy Keane this, Patrick Vieira and N'Golo Kante, It's what's going to happen. I can predict that right now. Or they'll go the other way and say he was overrated, he wasn't that good. They're going to go. You can't. The thing with Talksport is they're going to go extreme one way or the other. They're not going to just say he was an unbelievable world-class player. They're going to go he was disrespected or da. That's what it's going to be, and that's something I think.
Well, the first thing they jumped on Talksport, rather than paying homage to a world-class player in Fernandinho, is they jumped on the fact that Pep didn't know. So instantly trying to cause drama. Pep didn't know that Fernandinho was retiring. Oh, do you know what? Give it a rest. Stand by, Leeds fans, because you will see Calvin's face splashed all over Talksport in the next 24 hours saying Man City to go in for Calvin Phillips as Fernandinho replacement. I can almost guarantee. I can
tell you the headline now will be Phillips versus Rice. Pep's got to choose or something like that. They'll try and build a narrative like that of something boring like that and say, oh, he's contacted both, all these different stories. Don't believe it. Back the guy now and Marcelo Bielsa over Talksport, because all you're doing at the minute is just, if you hammering Jesse Marsch and what he's doing, for me, the way I look at it is you do what Talksport want. That's my personal view on it.
You're just feeding the machine by doing that. That's all you're doing.
And they'll do it again now. They'll do it again on some other story. They'll jump on something else. I'm sure they'll pick on Rafinha again. In terms of Talksport, will pick on Rafinha again.
Stand by for the next time Gabby's on, because he'll bring this up and he'll be like, I was saying this, I told you they were training too hard, And it's just, again, because he knows he can wind Leeds fans up. Just ignore the pillock, because that's all he is. And he's only brought on to get clicks by talking nonsense, because he's certainly not brought in for his in-depth analysis of anything. So just ignore him, people. He's not worth it. He's not worth it.
Like the opposite of what was the advert that used to be because you're worth it?
L'Oreal.
The opposite of L'Oreal. That's how we're going to end this. The opposite of L'Oreal. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe button as well, because I don't know. Let us know in the comments, guys. Some people might be annoyed about this video, but that's not the angle we've gone towards. We're just defending two managers that have done a lot for this football club. Certainly one of them, Marcelo Bielsa, certainly more so than Jesse Marsch. But Jesse Marsch, I just felt needs defending, and that's why we did the video.
It's like you say, mate. The two men don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can have unerring admiration and love for Marcelo Bielsa and still get behind and support Jesse Marsch. And there just seems to be this narrative at the minute where you're either in Team Marsch or Team Bielsa, and the last person who would want that is Marcelo Bielsa.
Yes, and that's the point. That is the key point here. There's no Team Marsch, there's no Team Bielsa. It's Team Leeds United for me. And yeah, we'll leave it there anyway, guys. And we'll find. Yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. Make sure you get your comments in, and there'll be plenty more content on the way as well. See you later, guys. See you later.